Good Thursday morning, Northstate. Preston, Donion here in the Northstate Weather Center, breaking down fire weather conditions as they relate to the ongoing blazes in the Los Angeles area. So I want to do a little bit of what I've done on air in terms of talking about the weather conditions and what we've seen in terms of fire activity recently. So I'll take you over to the weather computer. Going to try and keep this one tight, maybe 10 minutes, fly you through what we're seeing across the area, how things are going right now, what that means for fire behavior, and then what we can expect through the rest of the work week. So today, tomorrow, and maybe even a quick look into the weekend. So right now, I'm going to flip you over to the weather computer and we'll start breaking things down, starting with those California wildfires and their perimeters. So as this takes your full screen, going to make sure that it's okay. I apologize. Give me half a second here to reset that, and we'll give you that perimeter fill in, because that's going to look a lot better than just seeing that kind of blank area. So as I zoom in here, you should be able to see the screen. Let me know if you're having any issues with audio or anything like that. Please do say, just, leave a comment and we'll go through it. So this is the big picture. You can see those two largest fires on your screen there, north of Pasadena in the Altadena area there, towards the middle of the screen, and then off a little bit further to the left, you're seeing that's the Palisades fire. That's the one you've heard a lot about now, already being called likely, if not almost certainly, the costliest fire in Los Angeles history. And of course, the Altadena fire has had that fire near Altadena, right? This is the Eaton fire. Also over 10,000 acres as of the last report, and this is one that has seen 5 fatalities. So these have been very, very destructive fires. We're going to take a closer look at both of them. First of all, taking you to the Palisades fire, give you a little context on what's going on and how we expect this to behave throughout the day. So in red, some of those brighter red dots, those are more recent hotspots detected in the past 12 hours in terms of fire activity. So satellites fly over the region, and if they detect heat, if they detect bright, hot areas, they're going to put that in there as a pinpoint. So in red are the more recent ones. In orange, those are hotspots that were detected in the past 12 to 24 hours. So they're a little bit older, and through this time-based system, we can have a little bit of a better sense of how the fire is behaving in recent hours. One area where you see a lot of orange and red dots is around the community of Pacific Palisades. Now, that is a suburban environment, very tightly packed streets, lots of homes, businesses, and unfortunately, they have been heavily impacted. That's likely where a lot of the images you've seen are coming from, are the neighborhoods in that area. That is an area we're still seeing a lot of fire activity. Even though this fire started in that general vicinity on Tuesday, still a lot of hotspots as buildings and other features of man-made geography continue to burn hot and active. Now, as you move into the more rural elements of this area, you start to get into the foothills. You can notice the terrain gets a little steep, rough, rugged, and that's where we've seen some of the more neutral condition fire behavior. And when I say that, I mean this is what fire would do under neutral conditions, nothing else going on. With the winds, that drove so much of that fire activity right down to the beaches here in this portion of LA County. So it's been super, destructive for communities all the way along the PCH, all the way along 101 there. But now we're starting to see the fire do what it would do under neutral conditions. Less wind out there this morning, and in those overnight hours, you're starting to see some creeping. Notice the clusters of red dots that go higher into the foothills. And so this has been one of the new kind of focus flanks in terms of fire activity is along that north end, because fire likes to run uphill. A lot of North State folks know this very well, right? We talk about fires wanting to run upslope because that fire burns hot. Heat rises, it rises up the slope with the fire, and as you bring that heat up the slope of foothills, of mountains, whatever you're talking about, as that happens, you dry out the vegetation and prime it for ignition. So fire moves faster uphill, and that's exactly what we're seeing in terms of those clusters of hotspots. You've seen a little bit of growth here on kind of the northwest flank of the fire, some more recent hotspots there, but the big focus has been growing north. So this is kind of in that area of Topanga Peak. That's one of the names that you're hearing. This is kind of where that activity is happening. But this is very rugged terrain, canyonous, and very hilly, and not super developed. And so there's a lot of areas that are hard to get to, and that's why this has been a difficult firefight. But it's also the funneling of those Santa Ana winds. Now I'm going to take you to the other fire, and this is one that doesn't look as impressive on your screen here. This is the Eaton fire. This one, you see the perimeter as it was last mapped. This was mapped at about 1,000 acres, so they haven't gotten a chance to get a good new map in the system, despite all the efforts that are going on to fight this fire and get resources on top of it, right? Multiple states up and down the West Coast, you get Nevada, resources are piling in to help fight both of these fires, and several others across the region. We'll look at one more in just a moment. But This is the Eaton fire. That mapping that you see, this cluster, that's only about 1,000 acres. It's now over 10,000 acres. That's the most recent update this morning. I'll take you over to Twitter in just a little bit, and we'll take a look at reports from the public information officer for LA County and for CAL FIRE in that area, and he's going to give you just the latest information on that. As of here, about 9:30, 10 o'clock on Thursday morning. So if you're watching this after the fact, this information is likely dated. That's kind of the challenge with fires, is things are only current in the moment, and after that, they become dated. So do stay tuned for the latest information. We'll have that for you on KRCRTV.com, KAEFTV.com, all of that. But let's talk a little bit about fire behavior here on the Eaton fire. Very similar setup. First of all, Pasadena, you can see that label behind all of these dots, and it's an equal cluster of orange and red. We have seen a ton of activity. Are the fires dying down overall? Wolfen, great question. We haven't really seen any trend in that way. Now, the weather conditions have become slightly more favorable, but still a lot of fire activity. And a big part of that is they are burning into the urban environment. And that's why you see such a thick cluster of still red dots in the Altadena area. These are suburbs, these are neighborhoods, these are businesses that are burning. And so you will see full street blocks in some helicopter imagery, drone imagery, whatever it may be, really sobering to see, because these are full city blocks that are burning. And of course, the fire behavior that you see in that environment is really extreme on its own before you even include the factor of those winds. Now, with the Santa Ana winds a little bit weaker out there over the past 12, 24 hours, you notice that creeping towards Mount Wilson as well, moving up the foothills. The general trend has been that kind of gradual move north. And so you'll see that on some of the cameras, that it's kind of creeping up the foothills. And again, if you just hopped on, we see that behavior because fire, obviously very hot. That heat rises up the slope of a hill. It dries out and warms up the vegetation upslope, and it sets that up to be ignited as the fire continues to move. So without the winds out there, there's going to be that general push to move upslope, but of course the winds are a big factor, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. And of course, you do see here, this is the Hearst fire. So this is north of San Fernando. Kind of along I-5 and 210 there. That's kind of the stretch that this is in. This is one that has had some decent containment. I have friends in the LA area keep seeing a lot of wind damage preceding this increase in fire. Yeah, the winds were such a big factor in these fires becoming so explosive in their growth and so destructive in communities. And so hopefully everyone that you know and everybody watching can stay safe out there. I hope this information helps you have a little bit better sense of what's going on there. Obviously, from afar, we can only observe and kind of talk about what we see in terms of, measurements, but on the ground, the images are dramatic. We had a reporter on the scene this morning on Daybreak talking about just how thick the smoke is, seeing people evacuating, everything. Such dramatic imagery. And again, our thoughts go out to everybody in Southern California. Now, back to the map here. This is the Hearst fire, and you see that kind of blob shape there. This is that mapping of that one. It's not the full size of what it's last been mapped at. That mapping that you see there counts for about 660 acres. It's over 800 acres as of last update, but this is one where we're not seeing new hotspots, so that just goes to show that these efforts are working. It's just Mother Nature's also working against everything that fire crews are doing, and that's just one of the challenges that they continue to navigate. So let's talk about that. Fire danger, not so much for us in the North State. We have seen a lot of good rain, and so while it's windy and warm, it's not a big problem. Now, in Southern California, that red flag warning that we're oh so familiar with in the summer is showing up here in January. This started back on Tuesday before those fires were out there. Meteorologists and fire agencies were raising the flag saying, hey, this is going to be a very destructive wind event with high fire potential. It's not often that you see the National Weather Service declare what they call a PDS, a particularly dangerous situation. And that is when you kind of escalate things beyond the normal red flag warning, beyond the normal storm conditions. It is when something is truly dire and action needs to be taken ahead of time. That was the situation going into Tuesday, knowing those Santa Ana winds were going to kick up, knowing that drought conditions are popping up across Southern California. We headed into that. That red flag warning's been out there pretty steadily since then, and you're seeing this area in red. So really all of downtown Los Angeles, Inglewood, Altadena, Pasadena, Malibu, Santa Monica, all these cities that you're hearing, areas where we're seeing fire activity, unfortunately underneath that red flag warning until 6 p.m. tomorrow. Now, once we get to that point, we should see some improvement. And in fact, this morning, we've already seen some modest improvement in those winds. As we zoom in, take a look at observations from a couple airports and sensors across the area, you see that winds are fairly calm out there. Even on Mount Wilson, above our communities, kind of into the rural atmosphere, the foothills, you're seeing that those winds have calmed down a little bit. So this is great news for fire crews out there. They're going to be dealing with a little bit less in terms of active fire behavior this morning. Becky, your son and friends live down there. I hope they can stay safe. This really is scary. Glad they're doing all right so far. And yep, staying diligent and prepared is the best that you can do. Obviously, very active fire behavior. All the video is shocking and something that we've seen a lot here in the North State over recent years and really throughout history. But it's just every time it never gets any easier to watch. And so seeing this out there, those area winds right now at LAX and other areas, really pretty calm. That's a positive for us. Now, gusts across the region, also generally calm. We've seen things kick up to about 12 miles an hour at Mount Wilson, which is one of those areas where you saw really, really strong Santa Ana winds filtering over the tops of the peaks and through some of those canyons up there earlier on in this fire event. So right now, this is about as good as it's been for a while, and we're going to take everything we can get in terms of fire crews getting out there. They're going to want this to last as long as possible. But I want to take you now to how those gusts are expected to play out. You see things pretty gusty out towards Calabasas, Malibu, Santa Monica, fairly calm winds there. They're protected, but San Fernando, and again, those other locations that I mentioned, maybe seeing gusts kick up towards 30 miles an hour as we roll into the later morning and into the afternoon. And then you see those gusts kind of get going again towards Mount Wilson, Mount Harvard, some of these areas here. Look at that red. That corresponds to that 40, 50 mile an hour potential surging through this area. Now, that doesn't translate necessarily in full force down to our communities, Altadena, Pasadena, other spots around here, Glendale. But it is still going to be breezier this afternoon, and that carries over into the overnight hours. You see Malibu, Calabasas, San Fernando still very gusty, Burbank also windy, and so that's going to be a concern, is that fire behavior doesn't moderate for super long if these winds kick up like they're expected to. And here's 1 a.m. tomorrow. Overnight hours, very difficult to get people out. That adds that other element of challenge, and then we see those winds start to pick up again. And these are those northeasterly winds, the Santa Ana winds being spun by high pressure to the north, low pressure to the south, and so it's all being funneled through the landscape. Becky says seeing pictures from Pacific Palisades reminded me of the Paradise Fire. Yeah, a lot of parallels there, and unfortunately so many of our North State natives and locals know the pain that people are going through, and hopefully we can, offer support down the line, because it is something that we've seen here locally. But this is truly just kind of unprecedented, certainly in Los Angeles specifically, this kind of fire event. As I mentioned, these gusts are going to kick up again overnight. Those northeasterly winds filtering over the foothills, through the gaps in the landscape, and down into lower Los Angeles. And so we're going to see things pretty gusty into tomorrow morning before a calmer day as a whole on Friday. That's not the end of the wind, though. That's the thing that you have to keep in mind, is there has been some talk about winds calming down. And in our show this morning on Daybreak, we had a sound from one of the officials in Los Angeles, and she was saying that they're going to see some improvement in the winds, and that's going to allow them to get a good handle on things. I'm really hopeful that that's true. But meteorologists, all throughout the state of California are still kind of looking ahead towards Sunday, Monday, another potential significant wind event. Not to the same extent as we saw Tuesday that ignited these fires, or at least helped them grow, whatever their cause may be. That's still undetermined. But whatever that was, those winds were stronger then than we might see into early next week. But of course, if fires are already out there raging and they're not contained at that point, it is going to be another concern for some significant spread. So please do make sure you check up on loved ones. I said this yesterday when we started talking about these fires. If they're under an evacuation warning, at the very least have your go bag ready to go. Make sure you've got gas in your car. Make sure you can get out and you have a plan. You know what your route is out of that area. So please reiterate these to your family, your friends that are down there. Of course, fire crews are doing the absolute best they can, and it is encouraging to see resources from all across the state and all across the western half of the U.S. really coming together to make this firefight possible, and that they can hopefully get a little bit of the upper hand on the fire in the coming days. Still some difficult days ahead. That's what I want to highlight. I'm not here to be a pessimist and say it's not possible. It is possible. The resources are getting down there, and they're figuring things out, and there are containment elements on some of the smaller fires. They're seeing things happen. You might not see that containment reflected in updates from officials from the National Forest. The Angeles National Forest is the one that's going to be giving out a lot of updates on the Eaton fire. They're still saying 0% containment. Is that necessarily true? maybe not. Maybe they're going to wait until they are really sure about that containment. And so keep that in mind. It's going to be 100% we know we have that containment before they say anything. So the efforts are going on out there, whether you see it in the numbers or not. That's something that I want to just reiterate. Now, I'll take you back to the weather computer briefly, just in case you're missing some of these morning updates that are coming in from the fire. I think a great resource. This is Eric Scott. He's a public information officer, a fire captain, and a paramedic with the LAFD. So he is a great resource, and everything he's saying here you really can kind of count on as being true. So I know this is probably small font, but I'll read you through the updates that he's put out in the past couple hours when it comes to several of these fires. So an hour ago, we posted Palisades fire update. This came out around 8:30 this morning. Size 17,234 acres. Unified command of LAFD, CAL FIRE, LA County Fire, LA Police Department, LA Sheriff's Department. So containment still at 0% on that one. They expect those winds to subside like we talked about. That'll allow them to increase those containment lines, still underneath the red flag warning with extreme fire behavior possible. So please evacuate when told to do so. He's absolutely right about that. If you have that evacuation warning, please do heed it. And if you have that order, you absolutely have to get out at that point. Here's one, and again, this is probably a little small on your screen, but he's saying damage assessment is ongoing at the Palisades fire. However, preliminary reports estimate the damage or destroyed structures to be in the thousands. This is the Palisades fire alone, and of course, we talked about, and I'll show you here on the fire map, Pasadena, the community. If we zoom in, you will see so many of these fire hotspots are over city streets. There are going to be hundreds of structures damaged or lost entirely in this area, as well as everything that we've seen in Pacific Palisades and some of these communities that kind of reach along the coast, Topanga Beach, out towards Malibu. Now, Malibu itself, largely kind of on the outside when it comes to those fire heat signatures, but we have seen smaller communities, neighborhoods impacted by fire here, and that's why you're seeing thousands of structures damaged or destroyed by the Palisades fire. And he mentions, again, safe to say, one of the most destructive natural disasters in the history of Los Angeles. So we go outside of just fires alone. We talk about natural disasters as a whole, one of the most destructive already. And of course, containment still a goal, not something we've seen a whole lot of yet. The Hearst fire here, this one started again on Tuesday, 855 acres as that last update this morning, 10% containment on that one. So that's that last polygon that I showed you, that last kind of almost croissant-shaped blob on the screen. That was the Hearst fire, and it wasn't the full mapping of the acreage. It was about 3/4 of the size that it really is right now. This is unified command with LA Fire Department, the Fire Service for the U.S., the Angeles National Forest, and LAPD. So a lot of agencies working together on this. This is one where they have a little bit of containment, and they've put down some flare-ups, so that's a real positive. And they've got some dozer lines out there, and that's something that we know about in the North State, is getting dozer lines out there to control that fire growth down the line. Very important. Eric Scott also, again, this is the PIO for the LA Fire Department. He works, right there on the front lines. He knows what's going on. The Woodley fire, this is one that you saw kind of closer to downtown Los Angeles. This one started yesterday, 30 acres, fully contained, and they're patrolling this one. It's knocked down, no threats with that. So that's a positive, because we continue to see new fires pop up day over day, right? The Sunset fire, this is one that we saw yesterday afternoon and into the evening. 42.8 acres on that one. Forward progress stopped, though. Crews working to put out hot spots within the fire perimeter, keep the wind from spreading those embers. They attacked this one aggressively, air and ground fire support. You see some of that dramatic shots of fire planes and helicopters dropping water and getting really good on top of those spots. That's one of those exact cases where that happened. The resources were out there, and they attacked aggressively and put an end to one of those smaller fires and prevented it from joining the Palisades fire, the Eaton fire, as those large continued threats across the region. So we talked about the Sunset fire. The Sunset fire was a structure fire. He said this one was very large, encompassing 2 large hillside homes with heavy fire exposing the brush. Broke out in the Studio City area, and the high winds caused that fire to extend into the adjacent brush, potentially causing another significant brush fire. So they got a handle on that one. That's another great positive there. LAFD poured all available resources onto the fire, and that's why that one's contained. They got an end to that. So preparations for today. This is what is listed here from the LA Fire Department. Continues to augment and recall firefighters to fill every available seat on every available apparatus in the city of Los Angeles today. Firefighters continue to move into the Southern California region from across the western United States. Weather conditions are beginning to turn favorable, which allows to increase containment lines. Our primary focus remains effecting rescues and saving lives while protecting property. The multiple incidents across the city and the region continue to tax our firefighters. However, every firefighter and law enforcement officer across the region remains committed to protecting our communities. So that's the latest on what's going on out there. Please do heed all evacuation orders and warnings in the Los Angeles area. We know all too well how severe and rapidly changing these fire conditions can be here in the North State. So pass that message along to your loved ones, your family, your friends, anybody that you know in Southern California. Obviously, they're dealing with a lot right now, but send them your well wishes, my well wishes, and make sure that they are staying tuned to the latest. Use all of those resources that we talk about often. Watch Duty, a great thing to download. Stay tuned to news resources out there. Have multiple sources getting that information, right? We talked about hundreds of thousands of people without power in Los Angeles. Make sure they've got a radio, something like that. If you can text them, if you can keep them updated, if they can't get that information directly, be that source for them. Again, we say here from the North State, we know this all too well. So please do stay safe out there, everybody. Thanks for hopping on. I appreciate you joining me this morning. I hope that helped a little bit, give some perspective. Maybe didn't calm any nerves because the situation is still so active, but gives you a little bit of a better idea of what's going on out there. We're going to continue to follow this here at KRCR TV throughout the day, and as these fires continue, I'll be back on Daybreak with another update tomorrow, 5 to 7 a.m. Join us, Channel 7 in the Valley, and out at the coast, Channel 23. Thanks so much.